So you look at a ticking clock, right? You watch that secondhand snap forward, and it just feels like that previous second is gone.
Yeah, entirely gone.
Exactly. Like it's slipped through your fingers, dropped into some bottomless well, and it's just forever out of reach.
It's a very common feeling.
Right. It is a profoundly human experience to feel this, this sense of loss simply because time is passing. But what if that lost second is actually a complete illusion?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is. What if the way you and I experience a single Tuesday is, at its core, essentially a perceptual trick?
A very convincing trick. I mean, our brains are wired for it.
Oh, absolutely. So today, our mission is to explore a concept from Paul Haagensen's video, We Magicians 21. And this text makes the argument that the past isn't obliterated at all.
Not even a little bit.
Right. It suggests that reality, like at its most fundamental level, operates entirely outside of our traditional concepts of space and time. So, okay, let's unpack this.
I'm glad we are. Because it is
Yeah.
radical reframing of how we exist in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we naturally rely on our senses.
Right. Seeing is believing.
Exactly. And our senses tell us a very linear story. Things begin, they happen, and then they are over. But this text asks us to step outside of that sensory bias.
Which is hard to do.
Very hard. We have to look to the underlying mechanics of what space and time actually are, rather than just, accepting how they feel to us on a daily basis. My goal today is to help decode this dense material with you, turning these highly abstract metaphysical concepts into aha moments without getting lost in the weeds.
And I appreciate that because Haagensen starts by basically taking a sledgehammer to that feeling of loss. I mean, the author writes, nothing lost. Just those two words to start.
It's a bold opening statement.
It really is. Then he unpacks why we assume things are lost. He notes that the very concept of space and time necessitates movement.
Right. And that is the core mechanical issue with human perception. In a three-dimensional world, one that's governed by time, you cannot measure anything without movement.
So like walking across a room.
Exactly. You walk from your kitchen to your living room. That is movement through physical space, and it requires a certain duration of time to complete.
Makes sense.
And because our consciousness is tied to this linear movement, our brains evolved to assume that when we move forward, whatever's behind us is just consumed or destroyed.
Which, makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint, right?
Completely.
I mean, if you are running away from a predator, you only care about where you are going, not the patch of dirt you just stepped on. You just leave it behind.
Exactly. Our brains prioritize the immediate incoming data. So we assume the past is, as the text explicitly says, obliterated.
We think it's a burned bridge.
Right. But the text argues that just because space and time require you to move, this doesn't imply the obliteration of preceding occurrences as our perceptions suggest.
So I was trying to visualize what a non-obliterated past actually looks like mechanically. And I know we used to compare this to reading a book.
The book analogy, yeah.
Right, turn the page, but page one still exists. But I actually think a video game rendering engine is a much better way to understand this.
Oh, that's interesting. How do you mean?
Well, think about playing a massive open-world video game. The entire world, the mountains, the cities, the oceans, it's all already coded onto the game's disk.
Right. It's all there at once.
Exactly. It all exists simultaneously. But your console only has enough processing power to render the specific room or field your character is currently standing in.
Okay, I follow.
So when you walk your character out of a tavern and into the forest, the tavern isn't obliterated. It doesn't cease to exist in the code. The game engine simply stops rendering it on your screen so it can render the trees instead.
That is a highly accurate mechanical translation of what Haagensen is describing.
Yeah.
Your television screen, in this analogy, is your perception. It necessitates movement to show you a story. But the disk itself represents the true architecture of reality. The preceding occurrences, like the events in the tavern, are still very much real and structurally present.
They are just off-screen.
Exactly. The past is a permanent fixture in the architecture of reality, even if your local hardware has moved on to rendering a new coordinate.
Well, it is comforting to think my past isn't obliterated, though I have to say, it sure doesn't help me find the car keys I lost yesterday.
Yeah, unfortunately not.
My perception is very much stuck on the current screen. But this leads to a massive structural question. If these preceding occurrences aren't obliterated, Where do they go when time and space dissolve?
That is the big jump.
Right, because the text doesn't just talk about time passing, it talks about the entire framework of time and space collapsing.
Yes, it takes us to the absolute foundation, which the text refers to as the singularity. It states that when the amalgamation of time and space seemingly dissolves, it gives rise to a singular entity.
And it describes this entity as a void that is brimming with pure energy. And I need to pause right there because my brain immediately rejects that phrasing.
The paradox gets a lot of people.
Wait, how can something be a completely dissolved void and a brimming fount at the exact same time? Isn't that a contradiction? If it's a void, I'm picturing an empty room, absolute nothingness.
Right, that's the standard definition.
But if it's brimming, maybe it's more like a room completely packed with water. There's no open space left, but it's completely full of potential. I mean, I'm struggling to reconcile those two words.
Well, what's fascinating here is that it is a deliberate paradox.
Yeah.
It's designed to force you out of physical thinking. Your water analogy is closer, but let's remove the physical room entirely.
Okay, no room.
In our normal vocabulary, a void is a vacuum. It is empty space. But remember, the text just said that the very concepts of space and time have dissolved. So this void isn't an empty physical container.
Because physical containers require space.
Exactly. It is a state of existence that is entirely empty of dimensions. It has no height, no width, no depth, and no duration.
Okay, so it lacks any structural boundaries. It's not that the box is empty, it's that there is no box.
Precisely.
Hmm.
Because it lacks all physical boundaries, it is a void. But what remains when you take away the boundaries?
The raw material.
Yes, the raw, unmanifested potential of all things. That is why it is brimming with pure energy. Without the restrictive containers of space and time forcing it into a specific shape or a specific moment, energy isn't locked down.
It's just there.
It is pure, boundless potential. The text calls this an inexhaustible fount from which all emanates.
Oh, wow. So time and space are really just filters. They are the things that force this boundless energy to take on a specific recognizable form, like a planet or a person or a ticking clock.
That's a great way to look at it.
But when you strip those filters away, you are just left with the raw source material of everything.
Exactly. And the text gets very specific about the nature of this raw source material. It says, the void signifies the absolute cessation of motion, a tranquil state of unmoved energy, while the essence of vibrant, astute, inventive energy persists.
Okay, the cessation of motion makes logical sense based on what we've established.
Because there's no space.
Right. If movement requires space and time are dissolved, then obviously you can't have motion. There is nowhere to move to and no time in which to do it.
So it has to be absolutely still, a tranquil state.
But then it immediately says this energy is astute and inventive. And I have to push back on that. Calling energy inventive borders on saying the universe has a conscious mind.
It does sound like that.
Right. Usually in physics, we think of fundamental energy as a blind, chaotic force, entropy. Is Haagensen actually suggesting the universe is thinking, or is this just a poetic metaphor?
It is not a metaphor. It is a literal attribution of intelligence to the fundamental state of reality.
Wait.
Yes. You are right that classical thermodynamics views the universe as trending toward chaos and entropy. But this metaphysical framework flips that entirely on its head.
How so?
By using the word astute, which implies sharp understanding or insight, and inventive, which implies creativity, design, and purpose. The author is arguing that the baseline of reality is inherently intelligent.
So it's not a guy with a white beard sitting on a cloud thinking up new animals, but it is an inherent organizing principle. It wants to create.
Yes. The stillness of the void isn't an idle, dead, resting state. It is a state of profound, creative contemplation.
That is wild.
The physical motion has ceased, but the intrinsic vibrational essence of the energy is fully alive.
You know, it makes me think of a drawn bowstring right before the arrow is released.
Oh, I like that.
If you take a high-speed photograph of an archer at full draw, there is zero physical motion. It is a tranquil state of absolute stillness. But if you were to touch that bowstring, you would feel an intense, vibrating tension.
It's packed with power.
Exactly. But according to this text, it's not just blind tension, it's tension with a blueprint. It's an astute tension. And here's where it gets really interesting. Energy isn't just a battery. The source says it's inventive.
The bowstring analogy beautifully captures the latent power, and adding the blueprint concept makes it align perfectly with Haagensen's point. It is tension waiting to execute a highly complex, inventive design.
But this raises the next logical issue for me.
which is
If this energy is perfectly still, yet brimming with an inventive blueprint, how does creation actually happen? I mean, if there is no space to move through, what is this energy doing?
right, because the text introduces a journey. It says, we progress onwards, traversing nuanced permutations across diverse frequencies and varying velocities of energy within distinct dimensions that coexist beyond our familiar temporal and spatial confines.
We just established that movement is an illusion of time and space, but now he's using words like progress onwards and traversing.
Notice very carefully how we are traversing, though. We aren't walking down a physical road. We are traversing nuanced permutations across diverse frequencies and varying velocities of energy.
So it's a completely different kind of movement.
Exactly. This is where the mechanics of this philosophy get incredibly fascinating. A permutation is just a variation, a specific arrangement of elements.
Okay, so if reality is just different arrangements of this fundamental energy, then moving through life isn't a physical journey from point A to point B. It's a shift in state.
Exactly. It is a vibrational shift. The dimensions aren't places you travel to in a spaceship. The text explicitly says these distinct dimensions coexist.
Meaning they are all here.
Yes, they are layered right on top of one another, occupying the exact same non-space.
I want to make sure I really understand the mechanism of this, because if I'm not moving physically, how do I actually shift my frequency?
That's a great question.
Like, how does a human being traverse a nuanced permutation on an average day? Because if these dimensions coexist, and they are everywhere all at once, why do I only see my specific living room?
Think about what dictates your reality at any given moment.
Yeah.
It isn't just your physical location. It is your state of consciousness,
Mood.
your emotional state, your deeply held focus, your level of awareness. In this framework, your consciousness acts as the tuning mechanism. When you drastically shift your perspective or process a profound realization, you haven't moved an inch physically, but your velocity of energy has changed.
Let me see if I can ground that with another analogy, like tuning a radio dial.
Perfect.
Let's say two people are standing in the exact same physical room. One person just received devastating news and is experiencing profound grief. The other person just fell in love and is experiencing overwhelming joy.
Okay, two very different states.
Right. Physically, they share the same spatial confines, but experientially, they are inhabiting entirely different dimensions. Their realities barely overlap. Is that what we mean by tuning into a different frequency of energy?
That is a perfect practical application of the concept. The grief and the joy are different velocities of energy. They are nuanced permutations of life.
And they exist in the same space.
Right. When your internal frequency changes, the reality you interact with changes, even if the physical coordinates remain identical. The source text is scaling that psychological truth up to a cosmological level.
Oh, wow.
We are constantly navigating through coexisting dimensions by altering our fundamental frequency.
That completely redefines agency. It means we aren't victims being dragged along a linear timeline against our will. We are active participants navigating a matrix of coexisting realities.
We are the ones tuning the dial.
But mechanically, if we are navigating these coexisting dimensions right now, what is the ultimate vehicle making this journey? If everything is just this singular void brimming with astute energy, who is doing the tuning?
That brings us to the final and most crucial mechanism of the entire excerpt. The author drops a single sentence that recontextualizes every single thing we have just analyzed.
I remember this part.
He writes, the term energy can be interchanged with life in this context.
Okay, I have to admit, when I first read that, it felt a bit like a philosophical bait and switch.
A lot of people feel that way initially.
Right, we spend all this time talking about physics, velocities, and singularities, and then at the very end, he swaps out the core noun. But when you actually follow his instruction and substitute the word, it completely shatters the boundary between us and the universe. Let's literally trace it back and swap the words.
Let's do it. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it changes everything.
So early on, it said the singularity is a void that is brimming with pure energy. If we make the swap, the singularity is brimming with pure life.
Yes, it becomes an inexhaustible fount of life.
And then it talked about the absolute cessation of motion being a tranquil state of unmoved energy. So that means beneath all the chaos of the world, there's a tranquil state of unmoved life.
Unmoved life, exactly.
And that the essence of reality isn't vibrant, astute, inventive energy. It is vibrant, astute, inventive life.
You see how drastically that shifts the mechanical understanding of the universe? When we use the word energy, it feels clinical. It feels like something a scientist measures in a laboratory.
Yeah, it feels separate from us.
Exactly. But when you replace it with life, you realize you cannot be separate from it. You're biological life. You possess consciousness.
So when he says energy is astute and inventive, he isn't anthropomorphizing a physics equation. He's saying that life itself, the very thing animating my vocal cords right now, the thing allowing you to listen to this, is the fundamental building block of reality.
Precisely. Life is not a byproduct of the universe. It is the universe.
That's a huge distinction.
Life is the inexhaustible fount. Life is the vibrant force traversing dimensional frequencies, the nuanced permutations we are progressing through. Those are just the infinite variations of life experiencing itself.
That answers my earlier question about who is doing the tuning. The vehicle isn't a separate entity navigating the energy. Life is navigating life.
Yes.
So what does this all mean? It means you are a specific permutation of the universe's baseline intelligence, tuning into different frequencies to experience the breadth of what exists.
It is a profoundly empowering architecture. It dismantles the isolation we often feel in a vast physical universe.
Because we aren't isolated at all.
Right. If you are fundamentally composed of the same inventive life that brims in the singularity, then you are not bound by the physical limits you perceive.
The loss of time, the obliteration of the past, it's all just the rendering engine.
Yes, those are just artifacts of the video game engine rendering the current frame.
Yeah.
The totality of your existence is secure in the underlying code.
It makes the daily grind feel remarkably different. I mean, it's wild to think that the same forces governing cosmic singularities are the exact same mechanics operating when you change your mind or shift your mood or learn something
You
new.
are actively traversing distinct dimensions.
Yep, we have pulled apart some incredibly dense material today. We started by challenging the illusion of a linear, obliterating timeline, recognizing that the past is a permanent fixture in reality, much like unrendered data on a game disk.
And we then explored the mechanics of the singularity, a void entirely empty of physical boundaries, yet brimming with the raw potential of existence.
Yeah, that paradox.
We examine how an absolute cessation of motion can still harbor a vibrant, astute, and inventive intelligence.
We looked at the how of it all, realizing that progress isn't about physical distance, but about shifting our conscious frequency to traverse coexisting dimensions.
The radio dial.
Exactly. And finally, we followed the author's instruction to replace the concept of cold physical energy with the undeniable reality of life itself, which places you, the listener, squarely at the center of this cosmological design.
It demands that we reconsider our relationship with our own existence. It pushes us to look past sensory limitations and recognize the profound depth of our own awareness.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thread to pull on as you go about the rest of your day. We spent a lot of time discussing how the absolute void, the foundation of all reality, is a tranquil state brimming with the inventive energy of life.
Right.
And it requires the absolute cessation of physical motion to exist in that pure state. So, if that is mechanically true, what does that mean for the quietest, most seemingly empty moments of your own day?
That's a great question.
When you are sitting in absolute silence doing nothing, feeling like you are making zero forward progress, are those moments of absolute stillness actually when you are tapping most directly into the inexhaustible fount?